hearing. Today's proceedings will also be disclosed through verbatim reports and on the Chamber of Deputies Web TV. Let me also remind you that remote participation is permitted for colleagues in accordance with the procedures set forth by the Committee on the Rules of Procedure. As part of the fact-finding inquiry into Italy's international commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and the fight against discrimination, today's agenda features a hearing with representatives of the association named Per cambiare l'ordine delle cose. Also, on behalf of the members of the committee, I would like to welcome and thank the following participants for their willingness to take part in our proceedings. Mrs. Giovanna Cavallo, coordinator of the Yalla Study Project, Professor Michela Semperbon, lecturer at the University of Parma and the Rector's Delegate for International Students and Refugees, Professor Marco Barrocetti, lecturer at the University of Bologna and Delegate for International Students and Refugees, joining us via video conference, as well as Mrs. Mal Al-Zanin, a student from Gaza. Good morning, everyone. The delegation is also accompanied by Paola Cucchetti, front office volunteer, as well as Mrs. Suyala Saab, head of student relations, as well as Stefano Giallada. I hope I did not mispronounce your surnames, and hope I have welcomed all of you. I would also like to welcome Nadia Monacelli, who is a researcher at the University of Parma, who is also linked up with us remotely, and Nicola Parisio, solicitor. Let me start off by reminding you that according to the report by the European Training Foundation, the European agency responsible for education, vocational training, and the labor market in EU neighboring countries, in the Gaza Strip, approximately 95% of all educational facilities have suffered damage as a result of bombing.
Forse da chiudere. Dicevo.
As I said, in the Gaza Strip, approximately 95% of all educational facilities have suffered damage as a result of bombing by Israeli armed forces. Today's hearing follows up on another discussion we had with the Forum on the occasion of the plenary committee meeting on 4th of December 2024, aims to illustrate the Yalla Right to Study project. This initiative was conceived to support young people from Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon who, since 2015, have been attempting to travel to Europe to either start off or complete university studies in a safe and accessible fashion. The platform has encountered concrete difficulty when it comes to student visas issuance, which, as these visas are subject to very strict requirements. As a consequence, the organization aims to provide young people wishing to study in Europe with accurate information on visa application procedure, also to offer legal assistance or counsel in the event of disputes, and raise awareness amongst Italian and European policymakers in order to facilitate legal entry for those wishing to study in Europe. Let me also remind you that this issue was the object of two questions in this committee. The first one was tabled by my colleague, Mrs. Honori, which has not been discussed yet, and one tabled by myself and my colleague Provenzano. This was discussed at the sitting of the 29th of October 2025. This focused on the outcomes of the UPOLS project, the Italian Universities for Palestinian Students project. This is an initiative launched by the Conference of Rectors of Italian Universities in cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the Ministry of Universities and Research, and the Consulate General of Italy in Jerusalem. This provides for the award of scholarships and different various Italian universities for students residing in the Palestinian territories who wish to undertake a full course of university studies in Italy. In addition to the students holding UPulse scholarships, there are many students from Gaza holding other types of scholarships and bursaries, and these are supported by national and international associations, as well as through the commitment of local Italian communities. In the parliamentary question I mentioned earlier, we asked the relevant ministers what measures they intended to undertake to make sure that all Palestinian students who were awarded scholarships could indeed obtain a Schengen study visa promptly, so a study visa swiftly. And we also asked the ministry to ensure that humanitarian corridors for Palestinian students and researchers from Gaza and the West Bank be recognized, established, and institutionalized. In its reply to this question, the government noted that 88 students from the UPulse project had already arrived in Italy. The government also reiterated its commitment to completing the reception of other students benefiting from the same project. However, the government highlighted the impossibility to envisage operations similar to the one carried out under this initiative for all students receiving scholarships at Italian universities or institutions. In other words, the government has already, as a matter of fact, said that its action could get only to a certain point as far as new students are concerned. Having provided this background, I am pleased to hand over to Mrs. Giovanna Cavallo in order to have an illustration of criticalities involved in the system. Over to you. Good morning, everybody. We would like to thank Chairwoman Laura Boldrini and the Committee on Human Rights and the Foreign Affairs Committee for hosting this hearing today. This already happened in the past, and we're grateful for this because this means that institutions are lending a helpful hand to us. They're listening to us, and this is pivotal for Italy and the international community alike. This means a lot to us. This is no little thing. As the chairwoman said, the Yalla study is composed of different activists who have been striving for the right to study and the freedom of movement. We truly believe that freedom of movement between countries is indeed the single biggest recognition of a human right. For study reasons, we started off because we realized that so many students in their countries of origin were ravaged by conflicts and wars and could not pursue their education projects. Also, the right to study is also a tool for international cooperation. This can be a tool to promote resilience and the right to study. The right to study when it comes to military aggressions and deprivation of rights is indeed the single biggest opportunity for societies to achieve self-determination. In 2025, we assisted over 150 Palestinian students coming from the Gaza Strip. We promoted a storytelling exercise to make sure that everybody could know that there was a chance to study abroad. We pursued legal actions for omissions by the Italian consulate in Jerusalem. When it comes to the UPulse project, and together with other actors by civil society, and in this connection, let me thank volunteers who actually allowed students to access the system, to enroll university studies, and to access visas. Without them, students would have never made it. And I would like to thank all universities involved for their help, for their support, because they provided a helpful hand with the calls for tender. On top of the UPulse calls for tender. This was pivotal for us to welcome students from Gaza. These universities did that for free, and they actually contributed with their own resources. The right to study is enshrined by international and European regulations, and it must be ensured irrespective of borders. While assisting 150 studies that reached out to us through Facebook, WhatsApp, and other, we've been trying to raise awareness. However, we were confronted with a great amount of red tape, and despite the opportunity provided by the Conference of Rectors, information is not optimal, and this is making it harder for students to reach out to consular authorities. Students believe that without bursaries, without an university carrying out a mediation role, there can be no visa issued. In fact, there are strict visa requirements that must be demonstrated. Nevertheless, visas can be issued also without a university bursary. These students have been applying for visa, but they've been denied so in the Gaza Strip as of August. And we're talking about 165 students, holders of UPALS bursaries, students with their own resources, artists. They were, in fact, disregarded in negotiations with the Conference of Rectors that we nonetheless thank for what they have done in bringing over 150 students to Italy. So what do we ask for? Visa issuance must be turned into a transparent and permanent procedure. The Italian law provides for strict procedures that must be carried out by the consulates with the students. Universities are, in fact, holding the whole burden on their own shoulders, and therefore we want to consular authorities to clarify requirements for authorizations and clearances from third countries, and we ask the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to increase the number of bursaries for students wishing to study abroad. There are different calls for tender that are currently ongoing. Let me remind you that the bursaries issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are funded by different funds, and we're talking about different millions of euros, which is a little thing compared to billions of euros spent for international missions by the relevant authorities. And by international missions, we mean agreement with Libya to push back migrants to their countries of origin. We believe a share of this spending must be earmarked to the right to study as a form of international cooperation. For us, the right to study is the first and most important tool for enforcing human rights. And we see this with our own eyes in Palestine. And I would like to thank all students from this country for being here. So we want sounder calls for tender, including for other countries. When it comes to Côte d'Ivoire or Sudan, there are at best 5 to 7 bursaries or scholarships for students coming from those countries. So we must do more. I would like to thank the committee and the commissions, and of course we are ready to take questions. Thank you very much, Mrs. Cavallo. I will now give the floor to Professor Michela Semperebon. Thank you very much, Chair Boldrini, honorable members. My name is Michela Semperebon. I represent the University of Parma for international students. And we have Professor Manocelli, who is linked up with us remotely, also representing international students. Our university has been striving for many years now to support international students and refugees alike to affirm their right to study and international mobility right. As my colleague has just said, there is an increasing framework of mobility and justice. Let me also thank all my colleagues from other universities in Italy and representatives of civil societies who have been striving to welcome this study, the students, which is yet another affirmation of their right to study. We, as University of Parma, receive many international students. There are over 1,000 students that are stranded in different countries because they were denied a visa. We are waiting for 6 students from Gaza. They actually pre-enrolled at the University of Parma last August, but their visa is still pending at the Consulate of Jerusalem. There are other universities in Italy that are awaiting over 150 students from Gaza. We have no updates on those. And I would like to thank Chair Boldrini for recalling that in a previous occasion we discussed the UPulse project, which was in fact kick-started, involving over 100 universities from Italy, with call for tenders for Palestinian students. These universities provided own resources for healthcare spending, accommodation spending, and so on and so forth. Since July 2025, the unit crisis of the ministry, the crisis unity of the Farnesina and other stakeholders have been cooperating with the Conference of Rectors to open up a corridor through Jordan. This corridor was indeed opened. Many universities received thousands of applications, high-profile applications, and as a consequence, universities provided further resources to host these students. Nevertheless, the corridor was blocked or closed, as a matter of fact. We, as delegates from rectors and universities and representatives of researchers alike, we want to affirm the right to study for all students, including students from Gaza, who live in a country where the right to study is, as a matter of fact, denied. Universities are under attack on a daily basis, and we know this. The International Court of Justice handed over an opinion on the situation in Gaza, stating that there are grounds to believe that Israel is indeed committing a genocide. And this is why we ask the honorable members of this committee to act as a matter of urgency to make sure that the Italian consulate in Jerusalem recognizes the reopening of this corridor, to make sure that stranded students can indeed reach our country. And we must ensure that their right to study is indeed recognized. Let me conclude by saying that there are also students in Iran, in Syria, and in other countries. They are not exceptional cases. This is common practice. Crisis hotspots are all over the world, and therefore we must regularize procedures to ensure the right to study. We must make sure that we as universities can indeed welcome the students. Thank you. Thank you.
Poi cercheremo di dare seguito.
We will try, of course, to follow up on all of these requests. I will now ask Ms. Maha Azanin to deliver her remarks if she wants to. She's a student from Gaza. Please, over to you.
Members of the Foreign Affairs and Human Rights Commission, thank you for the opportunity to share my journey, a story of profound transformation both in human and academic aspects. My name is Maha. I am a master's student in architectural design at Roma University, awarded IUPALS scholarship. My journey began in Gaza under catastrophic conditions. I applied for the opportunity while living through constant airstrikes. Thanks to the Italian government opening a university corridor, I was finally able to reach safety. As a mother, I requested to travel with my family, but since this was a university corridor evacuation, it was only for students without any family members. Here, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to everyone who contributed to amplifying my voice and advocating for allowing my 8-year-old son to come with me, to evacuate with me, while my husband remains in Gaza. Many of my fellow female students face the same painful separation. A Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement on October 16 gave us hope that the family reunification would be possible upon receiving our resident permanent. However, the reality on the ground has much more difficult. Beyond the challenging of adapting to a new country and balancing motherhood with intensive study, we face a critical legal vacuum. As IUPALS students, we lack a clear legal framework. Each of us must navigate complex administrative procedure individually, despite our exceptional circumstances. For example, we don't have a clear legal representative that can guide us in handling as much as applying for resident permit, obtaining a health insurance, or simple as opening a bank account. Those tasks were very critical for us. Most important, the issue of family reunification remains unresolved. We found that our current legal requirements don't match our reality. This makes reunification nearly impossible, leaving our family in ongoing danger and deeply affecting our academic focus. I stand before you today, highlighting that these scholarships do more than educate. They save lives. My time in Italy has shown me the power of international solidarity. This power is the only reason, after God, that allowed my fellow students and me to leave a place where we lost everything to build our new future. I am deeply grateful to everyone who supported us. Your efforts are building more human world. I ask you now to help us bridge this final gap so that we may focus on our future with the peace of mind that our families are safe. Thank you and God bless you.
Sì, grazie.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I can imagine the bureaucratic hardships you have to go through. They are hard for us as Italians, so I can't even imagine how hard they are for people coming from abroad. Last but not least, I'll hand over the floor to lecturer Marco Borracetti. I think he joins us online. Yeah, here you are. Please, over to you. Good morning. Madam Chair, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to speak to you and the members of this commission. Thank you. I teach EU and human and immigration law at the University of Bologna, and I'm also a delegate of the rector when it comes to refugees. The University of Bologna has long been receiving and welcoming refugees, and over the last 2 years, specific measures have been adopted to help Palestinian students or students coming from war-torn countries. Now, 7 students have been waiting for a visa at our consulate in Jerusalem, in addition to those that do not meet all requirements and who have been waiting in Gaza and the West Bank, in addition to those who are in Egypt or elsewhere in the world. from different countries. It's important that these outstanding issues are solved, especially those who are stranded in Jerusalem, and more generally, more awareness raising is needed. However, I will not repeat what my colleagues have said. I would just like to highlight two major issues. First, when it comes to economic and financial sustainability of these measures, we have to highlight that these measures are entirely borne by universities. It's universities that bear all the costs, even when we talk about the corridor that is guaranteed by the minister. Yes, it is true, the corridor is guaranteed by the government as a whole, but from a financial point of view, all measures in support of students and in support of scholars that come from war-torn countries are entirely borne by university. The second point is extremely important as well. The arrival of these students in Italy doesn't put an end to their problems, because according to applicable laws, once they are in Italy, those that will apply for international protection will have their academic position frozen until their dossier is settled. This means that they won't be able to formally enroll in universities, so universities will have to come up with another decision, because Article 39 of the law on migration doesn't allow asylum seekers to enroll in universities. And this, of course, causes even further instability. And this requires lawmakers to step in. I hope, and I actually ask you, we ask you, to step in as quickly as possible. This will be extremely important. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I think this thing is absurd. Applying for international protection means no longer enjoying scholarship. This is unbelievable. And anyway, we will try to do our best in this regard. Thank you very much for your remarks. I don't think there are any other remarks from the delegation, so I would like to ask my colleagues here if they have any question over the picture that you have painted, all the problems that our guests have highlighted, or if you would like to ask for further information. Perhaps Madam Chairman Zanella, Madam Chair Zanella has a question. Please, over to you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this very important opportunity that will certainly allow us to gain further insight into what we are looking into. I'm from a leftist party, and in my constituency in northern Italy, all my constituents pay a great deal of attention to this problem. As you may know, we as MPs in general always try to get in touch with embassies, vice ministers or ministers, and through these contacts we try to come up with solutions that are effective and quick, because the parliamentary tools at our disposal are unfortunately very slow. We have hearings, or we hold hearings, and we have other tools at hand. With our reports, we can do more, but this sometimes can be insufficient. As you said, there's a need for a transparent and direct pathway. However, over this issue, precisely over this issue, I haven't understood fully. I was talking about this issue with my colleague a short while ago, and this is something we don't know very well. What our colleague from what the professor said for Bologna was shocking, although we're not very much surprised, actually. I find it difficult to understand what exactly we can do to make the whole process run smoothly. And that's why I'm here. That's the main reason why I'm here. I have a question to the professor and to you as well. The scholarship, in some cases, represents a form of a chance for a person to save their own lives and their families' lives. But how much money are we talking about? How much money is this scholarship about? Because the professor said that universities bear the whole costs, but what are the amounts of money we're talking about? Because in the next budget law, we could make a specific request over this issue. And sorry if I talk for too long. Please, over to our colleague MP Ferrari. Thank you, everyone. First of all, let me say that I do not know in detail the issue we are dealing with today, so my questions could be a little bit naive, and I apologize. In my constituency in northern Italy, I dealt with education, and in the past, I had the chance of dealing with relations between our country and other countries from which students come. I'm talking about international students who may be refugees. My question is, a short while ago, you said that the agreement between the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Conference of Rectors that opened up the corridor through Jordan at the beginning allowed for some passages, but now it's closed. My question is, since when has it been closed? What justifications have been put forward? And what can we do to solve this deadlock, perhaps in Jerusalem or the entire Palestine? If you could just provide us with some inputs. A short while ago, I heard that there are problems that affect many countries in addition to Palestine when it comes to student mobility. I'm shocked too by this deadlock. In other words, those who demand, asylum seekers, in that asylum seekers cannot enroll in universities until their dossier is settled. This is unbelievable. This actually undermines the whole process. I also have another question over this issue. Over the last few months, I've heard about the deadlines for enrollment. In other words, there was an urgency. Has this urgency been solved? Are there some prorogations that universities can resort to in order to bypass these deadlines? One final question that I would like to raise or to put is what follows. I'm the chairwoman of the friendship group between Italy and Pakistan within the Italian Parliament. The Pakistani government has notified us that a large number of students are still waiting for visas. And the reasons that have been put forward to me by the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs is that Italian universities, and by the way, this is a question I now put to our university representatives here, they say that Italian universities cannot certify the reliability of the requisites that these students write down in their requests. It seems incredible to me, it seems illogical to me that today our universities, in cooperation with our embassy or our consulate in Pakistan, it seems absurd, it seems obnoxious to me that Italian universities cannot ascertain whether this is right or not. So if you could provide me with more information about that, thank you. I would also like to add a few questions. I would like to address the issue of reception. Once students arrive in Italy, who is responsible for welcoming them? Is it universities? What kind of alternatives are there today? Do universities have student hostels, student accommodation that is offered to students as a result of their scholarship? I've recently been to an Italian city called Siena, where there is a beautiful group of female students and one male student. We spent a lovely afternoon. I asked the professor that handled the whole process concerning scholarships. I asked him whether Palestinian students were in contact with Italian peers, whether they could talk to each other. I understood that this wasn't very easy. So that afternoon, students from the political sciences course came over to us, and these students took the floor, and some of them managed to explain why they were there. And this was a wonderful opportunity for them to speak out. The professors over there said to me that in order for these students to open their bank accounts, it was the professors that had to show up at the bank. It was them that had to go through all the procedures, and the same applied to the health insurance or national number. We have different universities here, from Parma, from Bologna. I would like to understand whether the situation is the same in other universities, whether they have to face the same problems. And I would also like to understand what the situation is like abroad. So, in other words, are there any other approaches abroad that we could follow? What can we ask the government to do? That's why I'm asking this question. I don't know who would like to reply to these questions first. Perhaps Mrs. Cavallo?
I will start from the last question by the Honourable Member Ferrari. Thank you, everyone. I'll start with the last question, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues. A bit of a forward. The study is based on the Italian legislation requirements, so income requirement, and this also links up with the bursary issue. So it's a minimum of 7,000 euros because the minimum income, the minimum allowance applies. So whoever wishes to come to Italy to study has to have at least 7,000 euros. And then bursaries vary from 10 to 12,000 euros, but the ones provided by universities, the minimum income requirement is 7,000 euros. So whoever has a 7,000 euros on their bank accounts are eligible for study visa. And then on the accommodation standpoint, there are other requirements. Elsewhere in the world, and based on what our desk officers know, there are rejections by consular authorities on grounds of migration risk. In other words, they question the truthfulness of university certificates, the true nature of, say, certifications or assurances given by parents. They question these very documents, and these rejections have to be condemned. As a matter of fact, we challenged these rejections, and we won most of the times. What we do is a fact. What we ask for is a fact-finding investigation into consular procedures to see whether the rejections were grounded or not, and how many were rejected. As a matter of fact, and ultimately, these are also public resources that are squandered. We want to make sure that university criteria can be ascertained through the Università Italy portal. This portal can certify the truthfulness of certifications. So, because as a matter of fact, there would be no more requirements. As for the other rejections, they were already deemed unlawful by the regional tribunals and courts of the Lazio region. I'll give the floor to Professor Semprebon. Over to you, Professor. Well, first of all, thank you so very much for these questions. I did not see them coming, and this is really a confirmation of your steadfast commitment to our cause. We are not alone in this predicament of ours, so thank you very much, Chair. Let me backtrack to these questions that were raised earlier today. On bursary, how much it is? 9,000 euros a year, and this includes accommodation costs. As far as Parma is concerned, in university accommodation, we're talking about 250 euros a month. So, do these 9,000 euros also include accommodation costs? The answer is yes. So, it is a reasonable amount. The accommodation issue is the single most important issue for international students. Vacancies are scarce in the university dorms, not to mention the private market, which is a wreckage, and we know this way too well, and there's a lot that needs to be done on this. Now, let me refer to the closure or the shutting down of corridor with Gaza. We have no information as for what concerns the grounds based on which the corridor was closed. The UPulse project was officially closed, and therefore the closure of the corridor ensued. And then we raised the issue of other students who had pre-enrolled before the shutting down of the corridor, and they were also denied entry. So we had no explanations whatsoever I did not mean to interrupt you, but let me ask, was the project closed? But the UPAS project, had it been completed, do you still have pre-enrolled students who did not make it on time before the closure of the project? Let me elaborate on this. The universities published some calls for tender for a certain number of posts. Let me give you one example. The Parma University made 5 such posts available. And then what happened? We received so many applications, and as a consequence, we asked for these students to be welcomed and to be received because they met all requirements and because we, as university, were willing to provide our own resources for these students. So the issue is obscure. There were lists of students covered by this UPALS project, who, as a matter of fact, were considered kind of laid-offs, say. So they were not included. But we, as University of Parma, were willing to provide bursaries with our own resources. There's many students who applied to be part of students in Italian universities with their own resources, and their applications were rejected because they were not part and parcel of the CRUI project. So we do not know whether these students are in fact being, processed through consulates or not. We have been asking for clarifications. Does this mean that the channel will be reopened soon? We don't know. We are in a limbo. Students keep on asking to be received, but we don't know what to tell them. Then there was a block on enrollments. We, as University of Parma, declared our full availability to renew enrollments. As a matter of fact, we could not do otherwise in the current international scenario. So we have no idea of timelines and procedures, and this will make the situation all the more tragic. Let me raise the example of Maha. She also has a child. What about the amount of the bursary? Is it still 9,000 euros? Well, I do not know what is the exact amount of her bursary. The 9,000 euro is the average bursary, but then every single university has been striving to meet specific needs. In our specific case of University of Parma, our students are childless, and therefore we did not provide for supplementary conditions or additional funds. As for the University of Roma 3, I'll hand the floor over to the student in question for her to elaborate on this. But let me remind you that many university dorms do not accept students with small children. So it remains to be seen how we can provide with the tailored accommodation to these students. If dorms do not accept children or infants, then we would end up living in a surreal world where students are asked not to have families in order to pursue their right to study. Can I ask you, how old is your child, and where do you live, and yes, what do you live on? What is your housing arrangement now?
Yes, thank you for asking. My child is 8 years old. He's my only child. I came with him here. In the first place, when the decision of going out with my child is resolved, I was very happy that I can give it with me, so I didn't ask so much because it was like 2 days before departure. When I came here, I surprised that the university told me that We couldn't give you a student housing because student housing don't allow the children. So they organized I think with one of the organization who host refugees, it's Santigidio organization, and they organize it for me to stay with in a house for it. I was very surprised of that because I didn't know this situation before, that the student housing don't allow children to be in it. And I tried to change and to have a better place that it will be more closer to the university so I can take care of my son while I am in the university. But it's very difficult to search a place in big city like Rome. So I'm staying now there. Sant'Egidio helped me through some procedures like putting my son in school and like this, and thanked for them for having me there. But it's not the perfect situation for a student to stay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, because having a child means you need somebody to take care.
Yeah.
And going to pick him up, you know.
Yeah.
Scusi. I'm sorry.
As I said, I hear you. I see how difficult it is to tend to a child and to pursue university studies. That's why I was asking whether you were granted a tailored accommodation solution or not. As I said, accommodation issues are the most important issues to be solved. Earlier today, you asked us how accommodation is provided in this regard. We are on the front line in this predicament. We provide university dorms, and in most of the Italian regions, they are managed by regional agencies. And we are also supported and assisted by the civil society. Let me give you the example of the city of Parma. And I'm sure Professor Baracetti can speak about Bologna, but Caritas helps us to a great deal, especially in emergency situations. For example, I had the case of a student coming from Ethiopia. He or she was denied a bursary from the regional authority, and he or she ended up in the streets. And this is why we acted immediately to provide him or her with a house, with the support of civil society actors, to see whether he or she had other relatives accompanying him or her. And then there's another point to raise, national healthcare insurance. 2 years ago, a requirement was introduced to pay something around 750 to 2,000 euros to have to enjoy public insurance. So students must have some kind of either private or public healthcare insurance to access universities. But as you can imagine, this is an unbearable sum to pay for those students. These students and universities alike are finding it difficult to make ends meet. And it is very difficult for universities to account for these expenses in the budgeting procedure as a whole. And this is why we are coming up with ad hoc assistance packages to support students. As a matter of fact, in order for a student to enjoy the right to study, they must enjoy the right to healthcare first and foremost. Another item on the to-do list is the following: family reunification, evacuation from Gaza for Maha. This was not the case, so she is here with. She came here with his child. but generally it wasn't possible to bring relatives here, despite the fact that the Italian legislation allows for family reunification for members, for relatives of students traveling abroad. Consulates were say adamant in denying this reunification, especially in the case of Jordan. Some consulates promised students to carry out reunification, which did not occur because, based on the Italian legislation, family reunification for students can be pursued after 2 years of residence here in Italy. And then there's a 12,000 euro requirement to meet, and there's also the issue of accommodation. So, you know, on top of everything else, many students have this other issue to come to terms with. Maha was lucky enough to taking her child with her, but we would like to see the rules enforced. In other words, we would like for her husband to come here for the sake of family reunification, for the sake of their child. One very last question.
The places provided compared to the applications. For instance, the university in the place where I live has allocated 10 places, but applications were 3,000. Do you have these figures? And have you assessed whether the applications meet requirements? In other words, out of the 3,000 people that came to my university, we can know can we know whether out of these 3,000, 1,000 of them actually met the requirements? Do your universities have those figures? And if so, can you provide them to us? I'll try to ask this question and another question that hasn't been replied yet, and then I would like to ask my colleagues as well. I think Professor Baraccetti would like to step in as well. Please, Professor, over to you. Yeah, I agree with these figures. We do not have precise figures Italy-wide. We should monitor each and every university. However, I agree with these figures. At the University of Parma, we are talking about less figures because we also welcomed other students from outside of the Palestinian territories. There is an imbalance, of course. Those who meet requirements versus those who win scholarships. So we, at the university, said we have to provide at least as many scholarships on humanitarian grounds. We cannot say no to all of these students. As for your question concerning Pakistan over the truthfulness, visas not being issued, over concerns over the truthfulness of requirements. In a nutshell, all that has to do with academic documents that describe the studies carried out by the student, all of this is assessed by a central agency in Italy. Many universities, though, in light of the complexities and the red tape that, of course, I don't have to talk you through, many universities, including the one in Parma, have set up their own commissions. So if students do not provide enough documents, also perhaps they cannot have it. If you are in Gaza, you can't have these documents. You don't have passports as well either. So these internal commissions, based on the information provided, and after holding an interview, they assess these applications in order to understand whether these students can access these courses. It is these universities with their own commissions that assess their cases. I'm afraid we have to wrap up the session, but before I do, I would like to leave the floor to Professor Barchetti, and then we'll wrap up this hearing. I will not repeat what my colleagues have said. The issue of the scholarship is extremely important and is related to the moment when these students arrive. If they arrive while the school year is ongoing, even if they win a scholarship, well, they should enroll in the ordinary course in order to have the scholarship. But scholarships are linked to the student passing a certain number of exams. This means that the students are already lagging behind simply because they arrived late. So what these universities try to help these students, but of course we always try to solve problems that other parties have caused. When it comes to enrollment, well, the system that is used as far as the question that I mentioned before is concerned is as follows. If students come by the end of the calendar year, well, we can enroll them for that academic year. In this case, 2025-2026. In addition to extending enrollment on exceptional cases, well, we have come up with this solution. We enroll them to one specific course, not to the whole course of political sciences or whatever. When the next academic year begins, the student enrolls in the whole course. However, this cannot take place, this remedy of ours cannot take place once the course is over. So in mid-May, for instance, so if students come in mid-May, how can I enroll them in that single course? The course is over. There's nothing I can do for them. If a student arrives in May, first and foremost, they have to go through a compulsory Italian language course, and then they are enrolled in the following academic year, following the assessment of consular authorities. And without going into detail, I have to say that delays have nothing to do with certification assessments. After these students have signed up to the Sign Italy platform, which is accessed live by the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, well, I think that's enough as far as we are concerned. This means that this problem has already been solved. And now, Madam Chair, allow me to highlight one more thing. There are sentences, there are verdicts handed down by the EU Court of Justice that say that consular authorities cannot step in when it comes to assessing whether a student is eligible to follow their study or to study in Italian universities. Sometimes it happens that a student coming from Congo, for instance, after studying engineering, if they want to study human rights, according to consular authorities, these two curricula are incompatible, and according to them, this is ground enough not to grant visa, and this unfortunately happens quite a lot. What happens abroad? Well, it depends. If we look at Canada, Japan, Germany, France, well, they all have public bodies or independent agencies that are financed, that are funded, and these bodies support or provide scholarships to incoming students and interact with universities. It's not them who run this process at the grassroots level, but provide a key contribution. Germany and France, for instance, carried out evacuations from Gaza, not just on humanitarian grounds, but also on study grounds, with much higher numbers than what Italy has carried out. If they did it, well, we can do it. Sorry if I raise my voice, but unfortunately I'm speaking online, so I tend to raise my voice. And I would like to thank the honorable MPs for their remarks. Thank you, Professor. Just 30 seconds, because I have to wrap it up. I would like to thank the Commission. I would like to convey to you the greetings of the students from the Italian city of Siena. Paola and I have been following them since the day they arrived from Gaza. So I just wanted to convey their greetings to you because I knew we would spend the afternoon with you. Thank you. Thank you very much for welcoming us, for your hospitality. Thank you. We'll definitely go back to this issue. We'll definitely keep in touch because we will need further documentation, more specific documentation. So, for instance, we can issue for example, a statement, or I don't know what exactly, but we need further documents. Or at the same time, we can ask the Minister of Foreign Affairs for further clarification. So, or we can issue a resolution in which provide sort of instructions that the government should follow in order to solve this problem. Thank you very much for your presence. I declare this here.